On June 1, 2009, Air France Flight 447 lifted off from Brazil, beginning what should have been a routine overnight journey to Paris. But within hours, the aircraft vanished, leaving investigators with one of aviation's greatest mysteries. There were no survivors of Air France Flight 447, which crashed into the mid-Atlantic Ocean on June 2009, killing all 228 people on board. The Airbus A330 stood ready at Rio de Janeiro, prepared for the long Atlantic crossing. It was a reliable, modern jet trusted worldwide and considered among the safest in service. Inside, families and business travelers prepared for a long night, unaware that they would never see sunrise. Captain Marc Dubois, 11,000 hours with 1,700 on the Airbus A330, First Officer David Robert, 6,500 hours 2,900 on this aircraft, First Officer Pierre-Cédric Bonin, 3,000 total hours 800 on the A330. Shortly before midnight, the aircraft pushed back, taxiing toward the runway under the cover of stormy skies. At 11:29 p.m., Air France 447 lifted off, climbing northward, passengers unaware of the fate awaiting them. The flight plan charted a course across the Atlantic, over the Intertropical Convergence Zone, a region infamous for violent storms. For centuries, sailors and pilots alike had feared this stretch of sky where weather is born with fury and unpredictability. Yet inside the cabin, life felt calm. Some passengers drifted to sleep, others read, unaware of turbulence slowly building. The crew monitored their instruments, watching as storm systems began to tower higher into their path. Air France 447 was now heading directly into the storm, and the events that followed would baffle experts for years. Captain Marc Dubois, 58 years old, led the crew with over 11,000 flying hours of experience. At his side, First Officer David Robert, with thousands of hours logged, prepared for the crossing. Also present, Pierre-Cédric Bonin, the relief pilot who would soon take control as part of the long-haul shift schedule. The Airbus A330 leveled into cruise altitude, its pilots monitoring the instruments as routine checks continued. On the weather radar, powerful storm activity was already forming ahead. First Officer Robert studied the radar, noting the towering storm clusters on their route. In the cabin, the atmosphere was calm. Passengers settled in for the overnight flight. Through the windows, flashes of lightning lit the horizon far ahead. Relief pilot Pierre-Cédric Bonin handled routine monitoring as the autopilot kept the aircraft steady. The A330's advanced systems were trusted to manage rough weather with little effort. High above the Atlantic, the A330 pressed on toward Europe. Many passengers slept peacefully, unaware of the danger growing outside. Captain Dubois prepared to rest, as was standard on long overnight flights. Bonin now took the controls as the captain stepped away for his scheduled break. Robert stayed at his station, monitoring, while Bonin flew the A330 into worsening weather. The storm grew ahead, rising higher than mountains, blocking the aircraft's path. The crew watched lightning split the sky. The Airbus A330 pressed forward, storm clouds rising like walls in the darkness. On the radar, the storm's intensity was clear, a violent cluster directly ahead. Robert adjusted course, steering around the worst of the turbulence. Inside the cabin, most remained unaware of the storm brewing ahead. Rain began to patter against the fuselage, flashes of lightning chasing across the sky. Relief pilot Bonin now held the controls, guiding the A330 through growing turbulence. The aircraft shuddered as it pierced the edge of the storm. Robert studied the screens closely, watching storm signatures expand across the radar. At this stage, all systems still appeared normal. Yet outside, the weather was anything but normal. Storm towers rose miles high. Rain lashed across the windshield as lightning tore the sky. Bonin tightened his grip on the controls as turbulence worsened. In the cabin, the jolts became stronger, passengers beginning to stir. The A330 now plunged directly into the heart of. Suddenly, the airspeed readings began to fail. Pitot tubes had iced over. Bonin instinctively pulled back, trying to gain altitude. Confusion spread quickly as their screens delivered conflicting data. The aircraft climbed steeply but dangerously so. A stall alarm blared in the cockpit. The alarm clearly shows that something is not right in the panel. Robert recognized the stall warning, but in the chaos, clarity slipped. The A330 was pitching higher, far beyond safe limit. Seat away in the cabin, turbulence grew severe, fear now spreading. The engines roared at climb power, but speed continued to drop. Bonin kept pulling the nose higher, convinced altitude was their salvation. He was trying to get the plane back to the right altitude and pulling the sidle back. The Airbus A330 now climbed into a deadly stall. Stall warnings filled the cockpit, piercing through the thunder. "It's frightening and fearful." Robert urged corrections, but Bonin's hands stayed firm on the controls. The passengers could feel the aircraft struggling, and fear spread in the cabin. The storm battered the aircraft's frame as speed bled away. Panic was clearly spread across the passenger, and everybody sensed something is wrong. The artificial horizon showed what they feared: the nose was climbing too far. Beneath them, the vast Atlantic waited in darkness. Bonin believed he was keeping the aircraft safe, but his actions sealed its fate. Robert called out warnings, but misunderstanding grew between the crew. The A330 clawed at the sky, but its wings no longer held lift. The stall warning would not stop, yet it went unheeded. Fear overtook Bonin as turbulence tossed the aircraft violently. The A330 had entered a deep stall, its engines screaming uselessly. Though the nose pointed skyward, the aircraft was falling from the sky. The Airbus A330 was trapped in a fatal stall, falling thousands of feet toward the ocean. In the cabin, passengers began to sense the worsening storm. Fear spread quietly, shown only in tense hands and anxious glances. The crew tried to reassure, but they too felt the storm's power. Outside, the wing fought against the violent turbulence. Some prayed, others froze in silence. Still, no one yet imagined the full scale of what was unfolding. In the cockpit, the pilots struggled with conflicting alarms. Then, the unthinkable oxygen masks dropped. Parents scrambled to secure their children, and it was clear what's happening. The cabin filled with panic, fear, and silence between thunderclaps, which was expected. Despite every effort, the aircraft kept sinking as altitude is getting lower. The jet's nose was high, but it was falling rapidly. Breaths became shallow and rapid. Every flash of lightning revealed fear etched on every face. Deep in the storm, Air France 447 was losing its battle. The sadness can be seen on people's faces as the plane is continuously on the downfall. As Flight France hit the water and then become the part of ocean until someone know what happened. All boarded souls were lost in an instant. As days after silence fell, search teams scoured the Atlantic, chasing faint signals in an endless sea. Naval ships and aircraft joined forces, their eyes fixed on the impossible task. Every horizon was watched, but the ocean revealed nothing. Robotic submersibles were deployed, combing the seafloor for hidden wreckage. The last known position was only a starting point. Uncertainty stretched for miles. Weak emergency pings surfaced, then vanished, teasing hope before silence. Months later, scattered fragments confirmed the jet's resting place. An engine lay twisted in silence, a ghost of the machine that once carried hundreds. The black boxes, though silent, became the holy grail of the search. Slowly, the pieces were raised, each carrying the weight of unanswered questions. Numbers confirmed it. This was Air France Flight 447. Investigators studied every shard, desperate to uncover the truth. Years passed before the final discovery. The wreck lay over 4,000 meters below. At last, the Atlantic surrendered its secret, piece by piece. Once wreckage was secured, French investigators began piecing together the jet's final moments. The flight recorders, battered but intact, carried the voices and numbers of the lost flight. Data revealed airspeed sensors iced over, sending false readings to the crew. The flight path showed a deadly descent, gradual at first, then catastrophic. Experts explained how confusion in the cockpit turned storm turbulence into disaster. The cockpit echoed with stall warnings, ignored in chaos as the jet plunged. Simulations showed the aircraft could have recovered had the situation been understood in time. Investigators reconstructed the crash, exposing how training gaps magnified the tragedy. In 2012, the final report concluded, technical faults, human error, and training failures converged fatally. The findings brought answers but little comfort to those who waited years for truth. In Brazil, families gathered at memorials, keeping alive the faces of those lost. In Paris, engraved names stood as permanent reminders of the night the Atlantic claimed 228 souls. Airlines upgraded training, ensuring crews were better prepared for high-altitude emergencies. The tragedy became a case study, shaping a generation of pilots worldwide. Though Flight 447 never arrived, its legacy lives on in every lesson learned and every life saved.
This film was crafted with precision, every frame, every sound, every heartbeat to honor truth above drama. Behind every investigation, there are storytellers determined to make sure these lessons reach the skis once more. You've watched stories written in courage, loss, and discovery, each one a chapter in aviation's unending pursuit of safety. This has been a Crash Deck Diaries original, where every flight tells a story, and every story reminds us the sky remembers.